Greetings, Culturians, and welcome back to the channel. Now, we have a very strange situation with Stranger Things, and, well, I guess that makes a lot of sense, but the audience seems to be turning its back on or rebelling against what happened in the second part of Season 5. Nobody's interested anymore, and they're downgrading this, like, left and right. We've got evidence of that. Of course, I'm going to show you that here in just a moment, but the backlash is for real, and it's been for real since all the way back when it premiered. People are not thrilled with what's going on, and maybe the Duffer Brothers might be, well, trouble in the future, and that's bad news, not for Netflix, but for Paramount, and we'll get into that in just a moment, so here we go. So there's a lot of things going on here. A few people would say that it's woke politics that is getting involved and making this probably one of the worst things that anybody could imagine, especially Netflix. Netflix probably wasn't planning on a complete disaster when they were looking at what would be the final season of Stranger Things. Volume 5 is literally facing a backlash, and it was predictable. I mean, we kind of knew some shenanigans were going on, and some behind-the-scenes reporting gave us some interesting early leaks that we probably should have been paying attention to. But from Cosmic Book News, we've got our first story here, and it's not a good one. Stranger Things 2 Season 5 Volume 2 hit Netflix on December 25th. Merry Christmas, everybody. You've got episodes 5 through 7, 5, 6, 7, that's 3 episodes. The reaction to those 3 episodes, absolutely, completely, and totally brutal. What was already a divided fan base after Volume 1, which wasn't super thrilled with that, became openly hostile, with backlash spreading across social media and even across YouTube and other platforms as well. Audience scores for Rotten Tomatoes dropped sharply, as you saw from the early intro there, and you're looking at the high 70 range at best, with episode 7 quickly becoming the lowest rated episodes on the entire series. In fact, as you saw there before just a moment ago, these numbers continue to fall, and they're not in the good range. It looks like the audience may be done with Stranger Things. Again, bad news for Netflix. Why would you keep it if the show you were keeping it for decided to go woke AF? But hey, that's kind of what's been happening these days. So we'll move on, because our friends over at That Park Place did their own version of coverage here, with Marvin Montanaro talking about it just a few days later. Stranger Things creators spent more time writing Will's coming out scene than the show's world-ending plot. And I have to tell you, the world, the series end, whatever you want to call what was going on with this show, kind of fell apart at the end. This is now being compared to terrible stuff like the end of Game of Thrones, or perhaps even the terrible ending of How I Met Your Mother. And there have been a lot of shows that have not ended well, and Netflix seems to lead the league in how to not end things. So we'll get into the article by Marvin with this. In a season of Stranger Things packed with apocalyptic takes and stakes and collapsing realities, the revelations about the very fabric of entire dimensions is just one of many things that just go haywire or wrong. One creative revelation actually stands out, and not for the reasons that fans might expect. See, according to the Duffer Brothers themselves, the now infamous Stranger Things scene where Will Byers comes out to his friends and family took longer to write than any other scene in the show's entire 5-year history. That 5-season run, I guess, runs, well, closer to a decade at this point after all of the time it took. And it's nowhere near writing like the end of the world devastation that was basically unfolding because of Vecna's Endgame, which again didn't take that much time to write. The mysteries in the series that, again, they've spent a decade towards building and unraveling never took this long. It was this one scene that was not even going to be a little bit divisive. It was going to absolutely destroy people's interest and love of a beloved series that for 5 seasons had kind of driven a platform, Netflix, to, well, popularity, along with, a few other limited series. This was kind of it. And an element that really, literally nobody wanted. I haven't seen anything this divisive personally since Game of Thrones and the way it ended, which I thought was an atrocity, and probably the way the books are going to end, which will be just a cementing of some of the worst ideas I've ever seen put to film or digital, or however you want to refer to it. The admission that this took as long as it did raises a lot of uncomfortable questions about the priorities here, knowing full well that up until this point, this was kind of strictly guided by the era that it was created for, or about, or in. And when it weighted against everything else that was happening in Stranger Things Season 5, well, it got worse. And the Duffers admit it, actually. The revelation comes directly from those co-creators, the Duffer Brothers, Matt Duffer, and specifically talking about it in a post-episode breakdown interview with Variety. "We were so concerned about getting it right," Duffer explained. "We're definitely nervous about how it's going to go over with everyone. Well, I can tell you, it didn't go over well. Just take a look at the popcorn score that continues to fall." We went on to clarify that the anxiety wasn't just about the audience reaction, which I can assure you they knew was going to be an absolute disaster. They also probably knew that it was maybe the only way that completely woke entity like Netflix would allow them to finish the story that they were telling. But because ultimately it needed to resonate and be truthful for him. We really were writing it to and for Noah and not for the audience at all. It was definitely something that was emotional. In fact, Duffer added that Schnapp's response was very emotional. In fact, he talked about it at length for a long period of time during his portion of several interviews. Now, he wrote us sobbing after he read it, so it really worked and resonated for him, which was great. But if you ask the audience, not super great for them. Perhaps a test screening or conversation around some super fans of the show maybe would have led you to a different outcome. But all of this is presented as evidence of care and sensitivity, but it also illustrates something else entirely, according to, obviously, Marvin. This scene was treated as uniquely delicate and worthy of stopping the entire plot in the penultimate episode of a season where the literal fate of the world hangs in the balance. A coming out story in the middle of the end of the world, which I can assure you nobody's going to take notice of in a real apocalypse. So out of place would be a kind way to say this. Now, the Duffer Brothers, in another Cosmic Book News articles, may have just ended their careers. Duffer Brothers toast? ? Maybe. Stranger Things finale sparks Game of Thrones level backlash. And you know what? This is absolutely true. I'm finding more and more negative here than I am positive. And this is an article that appeared before Marvin even started writing his. Matt put it together on December 27th. Did the Duffer Brothers just kill their career before it even started? Sound familiar? All of those things, I would say, do. Especially when it comes to Game of Thrones. The backlash to the Stranger Things finale is now being openly compared to Game of Thrones, and that comparison is not a compliment, not in any way. I think most people would agree one of the worst endings we've ever received. And I was not a fan of the ending of Game of Thrones and thought that it just kind of put a cap on the terrible last season where everything was just kind of thrown to the wind in favor of a political end that really was the beginning of the end to pretty much all media, and not just streaming, but television and perhaps Warner Brothers itself. But what started as frustration over bloated episodes and weak writing has turned into full-blown backlash. Fans are angry, ratings are sliding, and social media sentiment has flipped fast. Just like Game of Thrones, the once beloved series is ending with disappointment instead of celebration. And our friend Gary, otherwise known as Nerdrotic, comes through with this, stating that Stranger Things Season 5, the worst season of the series by far, comically bad. And that's actually being nice about it. The Game of Thrones cautionary tale. Well, it should have been. It should have been something that the Duffer Brothers looked at or could hearken back to realize what they were about to do. Everybody remembered what happened in the final season of Game of Thrones. After the Game of Thrones finale meltdown, creators David Benioff and D.B. Weiss walked away from HBO under a cloud. They were supposed to make a Star Wars movie for Disney. That project quietly disappeared. Officially, reasons were never spelled out. Nobody knows why, except, let me tell you this, everybody knows why. It was because they destroyed Game of Thrones on their way out the door. Nobody was looking forward to more disasters for a Disney Lucasfilm that was already falling apart and disappointing fans. We didn't want more or a trilogy from two people who destroyed one of the greatest fantasy tales ever told. His was, at the time, ranking up there with Lord of the Rings. Now, well, probably not so much, at least not in my estimation. They landed at Netflix with the three-body problem. And you know what? Nobody cared. Despite massive hype and spending on that show, the show barely squeaked out a second season renewal, and hardly anybody would have considered that a victory lap, but nobody's super excited about season 2. The Duffer Brothers exit Netflix. They're gone. They're on their way to Paramount. History certainly seems to be repeating itself, as Matt McGloin writes here. Following Stranger Things, the Duffer Brothers are leaving Netflix for a 4-year contract deal with Paramount starting in April. On paper, sounds like a win. Reality, it's now raising eyebrows, especially mine. I don't know how anybody can see this as a win or anything good for Paramount at this point. If they couldn't find an ending, they're no better than the other people who can't find an ending for Paramount, whether you're talking about Klutzman or J.J. Abrams or anybody else. Mystery Box Theater doesn't work forever, and Stranger Things was Netflix's crown jewel. So if the finale had landed cleanly, the Duffers would be untouchable, set for life, in a great place, could do anything they wanted at Paramount. Now, I imagine people are going to be, well, scrutinizing everything they do, every budget they put in, and every line that they write. Instead, as is written here, they're exiting right as the backlash is peaking. The fans openly questioning their writing choices, pacing, and obsession with message-first storytelling that, well, everybody is now over, not just in television, but in film as well. And pretty soon, even on social media platforms such as the one I'm talking to you on right now. This woke finale meeting a changing Hollywood is probably the last of its kind, or one of a few anyway. The timing couldn't be worse for the Duffer Brothers or Hollywood as a whole. Stranger Things is ending one of the most divisive, agenda-heavy finales yet. We haven't seen something like this since, well, I don't know, Marvel decided to do a whole phase of complete female-driven garbage that I've been talking about now for the better part of 3 years. Yet this is exactly Hollywood power dynamics shifting in real time, and we're all seeing it. Paramount, meanwhile, has been reported to be moving in a more openly MAGA-friendly direction, or let's just call it what it is, a more normal and welcoming area that everybody can participate in. It's leaning away from the kind of messaging that has been dominating Stranger Things' final stretch in season 5, its final season. It was really message AF, full of woke baloney sausage that I think everybody's been done with for the better part of 2 years now. Studios don't exist to make statements. They really don't. And this is something that Netflix itself and its internal politics are going to have to learn faster than I think they're capable of. They exist strictly to make money, which is why I really hope that Paramount ends up acquiring Warner Brothers and not the fake, fully considered offer that Netflix made for Warner Brothers Studio. Right now, the industry is backing away from content that sparks backlash instead of buzz because guess what? There is such a thing as bad publicity, and everybody is now pretty allergic to it, including this guy. Netflix even just canceled a woke military coming-of-age garbage thing called Boots, which I have to tell you, I'm grateful for, but I'm sure the military is as well, since they went very much anti-message and anti-woke with the military and basically kicked DEI out on its patootie. So the question remains, and as we wrap up this video, are the Duffer Brothers following Weiss and Benioff? I certainly hope not. These are younger guys. They really don't strike me as people with a lot of depth or maybe even control over a lot of great ideas. This is an uncomfortable comparison nobody wants to make, according to our friend Matt McGloin, but everybody's making it anyway. Weiss and Benioff went from untouchable to radioactive overnight. Not almost overnight, exactly overnight. And the Duffer Brothers are already having their same similar moment. I pretty much can tell you Paramount's now taking a second look at that contract and looking for lots of ways to potentially weasel out of it. The finale has been widely mocked, and I have to tell you, I've watched my friends do an excellent job of breaking it down and kind of destroying it in every single line of dialogue, if not specifically the scene that kills it all. But critics are hedging on this because they don't want to lose what credibility they think they still have left. Of course, we know better, but social media is roasting every creative decision, which, again, I've enjoyed. I'm sure you have as well. But with Paramount betting big on Stranger Things brand, well, the damage is hopefully going to stay with Netflix. I don't think so, and neither does Matt by writing good luck with that. Jack Posobiec just kind of went ballistic on this thing, and he's not wrong in the tweet that he sent out on X. Hollywood has a short memory for failure, and that's true, but it doesn't always forget. And when it comes to destroying a cash cow, like what just happened, they never forget. They're like an elephant. It didn't just stumble, as Matt writes here, it face planted. And history shows that creators don't always escape with that kind of damage that, well, doesn't just stick with them. Weiss and Benioff, Taika Waititi, and you have even more creators that we could certainly name that kind of destroyed their image and their future. I think this is one of those cases. But hey, that's what I think. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Did Stranger Things not just end badly, but basically obliterated itself? Do you think the two creators, the Duffer Brothers, are going to be able to put this behind them and go forward with their Paramount deal in a way that will, redeem them? Or do you think that this is going to saddle them with a lot of additional scrutiny and maybe the words failure over their head for the rest of time? Let me know those thoughts down in the comments section below. And as always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya. But certainly not rewatching Stranger Things. Never again.